As you might have guessed, the relativity hits the art world in 1919, when the artists, like everybody else can read a newspaper, sees Einstein enter the scene with explosive force. John Covert was an American modernist who had studied in Munich and then gone to Paris, where he had become friends with Duchamp. And in 1919, he produced one of the first works that really dealt with relativity explicitly. It was called Time. And if we dig in to the upper left-hand corner, we see a 4. And that 4 is the fourth dimension. That fourth dimension is now time, not a generalization of spatial 3 dimensions into spatial 4 dimensions, but really fourth dimension is time. And we even see in small letters the x of space, the c of the speed of light, and the t of time. Other artists too began to engage with relativity in different registers. Hannah Höch, quite a radical figure in the art world, part of the Dada movement, produced one of her most famous works, cut with the Dada kitchen knife through the last Weimar beer-belly cultural epic of Germany in 1919-1920. And in this montage, you see elements of modernity, of new kinds of technology, pasted one against the other. And there, prominently displayed, is the face of Einstein, symbol now of a new world, brought in to justify, to authorize in a way, to stand as the vanguard of a new epoch of modern art as she was pursuing it. Even Time magazine put Einstein on the cover in February of 1928, the first of many covers of Time magazine, I should say, where the title is Albert Einstein, Suspicion is the Mother of Perception. That new way of looking at the world that Einstein seemed to open up for his generation was one that was taken up in the arts, in the sciences, and beyond. That suspicion, that putting into question that which had been held to be absolute and fixed and eternal, was what everyone wanted to see in the Einsteinian work. Among artists, you see, for example, Salvador Dali, whose work The Persistence of Memory, or as he put it, the soft, extravagant, and solitary paranoiac critical camembert of space and time, it's 1931, indicates some of the ways that these Einsteinian themes have come into the way of picturing the world. Certainly there's a psychoanalytic part of what Dali's doing, but also you see in the center of that image a figure, a kind of monstrous animal at the center, which turns out to be a distorted, collapsed version of Dali's own face. You see clocks, time, melting away, no longer with the rigid, mechanical absoluteness that we've come to expect from it. In 1952 to 54, Dali came back to these themes, still melting his clocks, but the surround now has congealed into the hard-edged geometry of a world that is becoming more rigid, less able to be melted by a pure psychoanalytic but inflected by relativistic perception of all things. In his Antimatter Manifesto of 1958, Dali wrote, "In the Surrealist period, I wanted to create the iconography of the interior world and the world of the marvelous of my father, Freud. Today, the exterior world and that of physics has transcended the one of psychology. My father today is Dr. Heisenberg." So in a way, you could see Dali's trajectory as moving from a kind of Einstein-Freud moment to a Heisenbergian moment, away from psychology, away from interiority, as the world solids up into these rigid geometrical forms, even if time is still melting around him. The surrealist André Breton celebrated his contemporary artists, Roberto Mata-Ashaurin, Gordon Onslow Ford, and Oscar Dominguez, as having been concerned with the four-dimensional space-time universe. Speaking of these paintings, Breton wrote this: "Though in their forays into the realm of science, the accuracy of their pronouncements remained largely unconfirmed," rather diplomatic way of putting it, "the important thing is that they all share the same deep yearning to transcend the three-dimensional universe. Although this particular question provided one of the leitmotifs of Cubism in its heroic period, there is no doubt that it assumed a greatly heightened significance as a result of Einstein. This became a theme taken up by artist after artist. We see, for example, in Mata Eschaueren's Vertigo of Eros from 1944, a fascination with space broken up into different planes of geometry, of universes, of spiral galaxies, all of this swirling around in a way that's been unhinged from the absolute order, the clockwork universe that had been left to us from Newton and his legacy. What we see in these paintings, in this attempt to take up themes of mathematics and physics, whether pre-Einsteinian, non-Euclidean, and multidimensional geometry, or post-Einsteinian four-dimensional space-time, is a sense that the artists were up to something. They were trying to disrupt their world back in 1912, 1913, and the decades that followed. And Einstein became a useful tool in advancing their work. It was a way of providing a set of metaphors, a set of visual images, a fascination with clocks and time and the breaking up of planes, but it was not causal. Einstein didn't cause modern abstraction, he didn't cause cubism, but the cubists, the surrealists, and so much of the artistic world brought Einstein in and used him as a representative and as an authorizing figure of a break with the culture that they'd inherited from the 19th century.